Boise, Idaho. 10:47 a.m. Father's Day. The black Jaguar slid through my father's iron gate, the engine purring low like a warning. Smooth, elegant, deliberate. I glanced at the rearview mirror as the tires stopped in front of the long wooden table on the lawn, where beer bottles clinked and laughter floated up from the man who had never once looked at me with pride. Franklin Camden, my father, was holding court, flanked by my two older brothers, Colton and Derek, the golden sons who could do no wrong. Every year, this backyard turned into a celebration of male triumph. Cold beers, checkered tablecloths, and the ritual of inherited favoritism disguised as tradition. I hadn't been in any family photo for nearly 2 years. No one had asked why. No one had noticed. And today, as I stepped out of that car in a navy blue suit with steel-lined cuffs catching the morning sun, he finally looked up, just a flicker in his eyes, confusion slicing through the usual smugness. Maris. Colton's voice broke the moment, his beer hovering mid-air. I walked toward them, slow, steady like a tide coming in. In my hand was a black envelope, thin but heavier than every unanswered text, every ignored birthday, every childhood achievement met with silence. Derek tilted his head, squinting like he couldn't quite compute how the quiet failure of the Camden family had shown up like she owned the place. My father leaned back in his chair, a slow smile creeping across his face. Well, look who finally remembered she has a father. I returned the smile, polite and flat. Happy Father's Day, Dad. I placed the envelope on the wooden table, right in front of him, along with a single car key. I brought a gift. You might want to open it now. The air froze. Even the ceiling fan on the porch seemed to pause. I didn't sit. I didn't wait for an invitation. I simply stood there, calm and quiet, as he reached forward, those same hands that once handed out scholarships to my brothers and slammed shut every door I tried to open. He slid the document out. At first, his expression held. Then his eyes landed on the center of the page and stayed there. A beat passed, then another, and then his brows furrowed like someone had just kicked him in the chest. What the hell is this? I didn't answer right away. I let the silence tighten around him like a noose. Then I tilted my head slightly. It's the official transfer of ownership. The company you've worked at for 18 years is now owned by Helix Frame. Colton stood up. Wait, Helix Frame? What's that? My company, I said, my voice sharper now. I'm the new chair. My father shot up from his seat, the wooden chair toppling backward. He snatched the paper, reading it again as if rereading it could rewrite the truth. His face drained as the blood rose to his eyes. You did what? I looked at him dead in the eye and smiled for real this time. I don't need you to say my name anymore, Dad, because now the company you brag about at every barbecue, it reports to me. And I turned around. Behind me, his voice cracked into a full-throated yell. But I didn't stop. I didn't turn, because this time the man who never saw me would never be able to unsee me again. When I was 10, I tried to win my father's attention with glitter and glue. It was Father's Day, one of those cloudless June afternoons where everything felt sticky and sun-drenched. I spent the whole morning at the kitchen table, carefully folding cardstock, writing a poem, decorating it with dollar store stars. I was proud of it, thought maybe he would be too. That maybe this year he'd actually smile. After dinner, I handed him the card. He took it without looking up, muttered, "Thanks," and went right back to watching the game. 5 minutes later, my brother Derek tossed him a store-bought mug that said "Number 1 Dad," and my father laughed like someone had gifted him a golden trophy. That was the first time I felt it deep in my bones. No matter what I did, I would never be enough. He wasn't cruel, not in the way some fathers are. He didn't yell or throw things. He just didn't care. He was a man of cold silence, and I learned early on how much louder that could be than shouting. My name is Maris Camden, and between the ages of 5 and 15, I don't think my father said it more than a dozen times. I was the quiet one, The one who drew in the margins of church bulletins and sat too long under the shade of the sycamore in our backyard, writing stories in spiral notebooks no one ever asked to read. My brothers, on the other hand, were firecrackers. Colton, the oldest, was a star athlete, captain of the football team by junior year. Derek, the youngest, had the kind of charm that could sell sand in a desert. Teachers adored him. Relatives ruffled his hair at holidays. And my father, he beamed. At the dinner table, my father would lean in, eyes bright, asking them about their games, their grades, their girlfriends. When I mentioned I got straight A's in math, he didn't even look up from his plate. Once, I mustered the courage to ask him for a new sketchbook. He didn't even blink. "What's the point?" he said. "You never finish anything." That sentence dug into me like a nail. I didn't even try to argue. I just nodded and stopped asking. Mom tried. She did. She'd whisper, "You're special, sweetheart. You see the world differently." But in our house, difference didn't win you praise. It earned you invisibility. There were rules that weren't written, but always enforced. If Colton wanted the last slice of pizza, he got it. If Derek needed gas money, it magically appeared in his glove box. If I wanted anything, I was being difficult. By the time I was 13, I had learned to be small, to keep my wins to myself, to sit in the shadow of their spotlight and smile as if I was happy just to be near the glow. But deep down, something else had started to grow. Not sadness, not anymore. It was something sharper, a quiet anger, a whisper that said, if he won't see you now, make him wish he had. So I began pushing harder, not for him, but for me. I studied late, took every honors class available. I entered essay contests, science fairs, summer programs. I started saving up from babysitting jobs and lemonade stands, just to buy my own art supplies. I stopped asking for his approval. I stopped believing it would ever come. Instead, I started building a version of myself I could be proud of. The girl who stayed after class, who worked through lunch, who showed up and never stopped showing up. I told myself, one day he'd have to notice. One day, I would become so undeniable that even he wouldn't be able to pretend I didn't exist. By the time I was 16, I had already stopped expecting my father to attend anything with my name on it. He didn't show up to the state science fair where I won second place. Didn't clap when I gave the student speech at our junior honor society. Didn't even come to my high school graduation. When I told him I'd been accepted into Boise State on a partial scholarship, he barely looked up from the newspaper. "That's nice," he muttered, "but make sure you study something useful." Useful. That was code for something he understood, something he could brag about. So instead of studying art or creative writing, what I actually loved, I chose accounting. I told myself it was fine, that maybe if I played by the rules long enough, he'd finally let me in. But of course he didn't. While I was taking 18 credit hours and pulling shifts at the campus dining hall, Derek was flying to Colorado for ski trips his friends' dads paid for. While I was living in a rundown apartment above a laundromat, eating canned soup and budgeting down to the cent, Colton was living in the guest house at home, rent-free, figuring things out. One summer, I overheard my father on the phone with a friend, bragging about Derek's internship with a real estate firm. He called him a born closer. When the man asked about me, Dad just laughed. "She's still bouncing between hobbies, I think." I had just started my third semester of accounting and was already interning with a firm downtown. But that didn't matter. Not to him. None of it ever did. Still, I didn't stop. I graduated with honors, got my CPA license, took a job with a mid-sized firm in Boise. I didn't expect applause, but part of me thought, maybe, just maybe, he'd finally say something. Instead, the night I passed my licensing exam, I came home to find a voicemail from Mom reminding me to RSVP for Derek's engagement dinner. No one even knew I'd taken the test. I stopped going home much after that. The house always felt colder now, like the air had turned on me. Still, I kept pushing forward, quietly, relentlessly, saving every dollar, taking on side clients, learning software development at night, just because I liked the logic of it. I rented a room in a shared house with 3 roommates, ate pasta 4 nights a week, tracked every cent on a spreadsheet. I told myself, if he won't clap for you, build a life that doesn't need his hands at all. That was the seed. I didn't know it then, but that was when the idea first formed, soft, fragile, still finding shape. I wanted to create something of my own, something no one could take credit for but me. And so, on a rainy Tuesday in September 2016, at 25 years old, sitting cross-legged on my bedroom floor with a used laptop and a second-hand desk lamp, I bought the domain name for Helix Frame. And with it, I bought the first brick of a future that wouldn't need his name to exist at all. I didn't quit my job right away. I worked full-time at the accounting firm during the day, and every night I came home, peeled off my blazer, and opened my laptop like it was a doorway out of the life I didn't choose. I spent hours learning UX design, platform integration, automation workflows, anything I could get my hands on. I didn't have investors. I didn't have mentors. I didn't even have furniture. Just a mattress on the floor, a desk missing one leg, and a dream that felt bigger than the walls around it. Helix Frame was supposed to be a side project, something small, a lightweight platform to help small business owners automate tasks they didn't have time for, appointment scheduling, email responses, customer follow-ups. Simple, scalable, and mine. I called it my invisible machine, a system that worked quietly in the background, the way I always had. The first version was buggy, crude. I launched it to 5 local businesses in Boise. 3 dropped it within a month. 1 ghosted me completely. Only 1 stuck around, and they didn't even pay. They just liked that I answered emails fast. I didn't let it stop me. I kept tweaking, improving. By spring of 2017, I had a working prototype and a basic website. By fall, I had my first paying client, $35 a month. That month, my dinner budget was $2 a day. I ate toast, drank instant coffee, sold half my closet on Facebook Marketplace to afford a newer used laptop. And still, no one in my family knew. They assumed I was still playing accountant. They never asked what I was working on. They never noticed I stopped coming to holidays. That Christmas, I didn't go home. I stayed in my tiny apartment, ordered Chinese takeout, and wrote 20 pages of back-end code through the night. It didn't feel lonely. It felt honest. Mom left me a voicemail that said she missed me. Dad didn't call. Derek posted a picture on Instagram of a Rolex with the caption, "Thanks, Dad." Colton got engaged. I scrolled through their lives like they were part of some other timeline. Meanwhile, mine was quietly taking shape. By summer of 2018, I had 4 paying clients. By fall, I had 10. I was still poor, still unknown, but I was no longer invisible to the people who mattered, my clients, my users, the ones who depended on what I'd built. I didn't need a stage. I didn't need a speech. I just needed to keep going. Late one night, I sat at my desk, back aching, eyes burning, fingers trembling from hours of typing, and I whispered to the room, to no one in particular, if he never looks up, I'll just build something so tall, he'll have no choice but to look up. And I meant it. It had been nearly a year since I'd sat across from my father. I wasn't planning to go home for Thanksgiving. Not really. But Mom called twice. Said she'd made my favorite sweet potato casserole. Said the boys were bringing their wives and kids. That it would mean a lot if we could all just be in one place. Like the old days. The old days. The ones where I was quiet and invisible and nobody noticed when I left the room. But I said yes. Maybe because I missed her. Maybe because I wanted to believe something had changed. Maybe because some part of me, a small, foolish part, still thought this time would be different. It wasn't. The house was the same. White shutters, warm lights, smell of roast turkey and baked cinnamon. I stood outside for a second before walking in, just listening. Laughter, clinking glasses, the sound of my brothers already taking up all the space in the room. When I stepped into the kitchen, no one looked twice. Colton was talking about his gym expansion. Derek was retelling a story about closing a real estate deal on a boat. Dad stood at the head of the island, sipping whiskey, nodding proudly like a captain surveying his fleet. I smiled, said hello, handed Mom a bottle of wine. She hugged me too long, and when she pulled back, her eyes were glassy. "I'm glad you came, sweetheart," she whispered. "You look different." I did. I'd cut my hair, wore a blazer that fit. My heels clicked on the tile like punctuation marks. I wasn't the girl in the corner anymore. At least, I didn't feel like her. Dinner was loud. Typical Camden chaos. Kids running under the table. Football on low volume in the background. Half the family shouting over the other half. I waited. I waited through the salad course. The turkey. The mashed potatoes. I waited as Dad made his usual toast, raising a glass to my boys, strong men, real men, doing this family proud. No mention of me. Not even a glance. So after dessert, I cleared my throat. I actually wanted to share something too, I said. My voice didn't shake. I was proud of that. Dad looked up, barely. Go ahead, honey. I launched my own company last year, a digital platform. We automate workflows for small businesses. We've grown revenue by 300% this quarter. I just hired my first employee. I waited. Dad blinked. Oh, yeah, he said, already turning toward Derek. That's nice. Derek, tell them about that waterfront listing, the one with the pool. And just like that, I vanished again. My company, my milestones, my voice, all drowned in a wave of someone else's story. I stared at my plate. The gravy had gone cold. My hands were folded neatly in my lap, but I felt something rise inside me, something old and sharp and tired of being polite. It wasn't anger. Not quite. It was something quieter, something colder, a decision, hardening like steel in my chest. I looked at my father. He was laughing at Derek's story. His eyes crinkled, his glass refilled. He'd never see me the way I'd wanted. He'd never say he was proud. He'd never even ask the simplest question, "What's it called, your company?" Because in his world, I wasn't the protagonist. I was just background. And in that moment, I realized maybe I'd never be the daughter he wanted. But I could become the woman he couldn't ignore. Not anymore. When the world shut down, mine cracked open. It was March 2020. The city slowed to a crawl. Downtown Boise emptied out like a ghost town. Offices closed. Schools went remote. People stocked up on toilet paper and fear. And me? I leaned in. While others were pausing, I pressed forward. Because I had nothing to fall back on, no family money, no cushion of comfort, no one to call if my savings dried up. All I had was Helix frame and the quiet belief that it was finally time. Turns out, when small businesses had to move online overnight, they didn't need charm. They didn't need flash. They needed help. They needed what I'd built. That spring, I went from 10 clients to 30. By midsummer, I was onboarding 2 new businesses every week. I pulled 16-hour days, slept in 90-minute shifts, hired my first 2 freelance developers, one from Colorado, one from India. We worked in Slack channels and Google Docs like our lives depended on it, because mine did. There were nights I cried under my desk from exhaustion, then wiped my face and kept typing. There were mornings I stood in the shower with my hands shaking from too much caffeine and not enough sleep. And still, I didn't tell anyone. My family thought I was still doing consulting. Dad didn't ask. Colton was busy opening his second gym. Derek bought a boat. They posted sunset selfies. I wrote code. By fall, we had 300 active users. By winter, we closed our first investment deal, $400,000 in seed funding from a niche venture capital firm out of Portland. I signed the papers on my lunch break in leggings, with dry shampoo in my hair and a cold coffee on my desk. No champagne, no toast, just a quiet line in my journal. This is what momentum feels like. Then came the email. It was February 2021 when I saw it, buried in my inbox between onboarding questions and bug reports. The subject line read, Acquisition Inquiry Mountain Tech Solutions. I froze. Mountain Tech. That was the company my father had worked at for 18 years. A mid-sized, aging software firm with slow growth and a long list of government clients. He always spoke of it like it was sacred ground, like the place would crumble without him. They were looking to sell. And not just sell, they were desperate. A few contracts had fallen through. Their tech was outdated. Leadership was ready to walk away before things got worse. And just like that, the idea clicked into place. It wasn't revenge. Not yet. It was opportunity. I reached out through a holding company, anonymous, quiet, professional. I kept everything under a different name. Signed NDAs. Took calls at night with my camera off. Played it slow, smart. They never knew it was me. The deal closed in October 2021. Helix Frame acquired 81% of Mountain Tech Solutions in a private transfer worth $4.2 million. Half cash, half equity. Clean, quiet, legal. And suddenly, I own the building my father walked into every Monday. I own the department budget, the leadership team, the chair he sat in. I didn't fire him, didn't demote him, didn't say a word, because silence was what he had taught me best. Instead, I watched him go to work, day after day, never realizing the walls around him now bore my name in fine print. Watched him take credit for things I funded. Watched him eat cake at retirement parties and talk about building legacies. He had no idea, but he would, because I had already chosen the date. Father's Day, 2022. The day he thought would be his again. The day I would take it all back. There's a specific kind of quiet that comes after a storm, when you know the damage is already done, but no one else does yet. That's what early 2022 felt like. On paper, I was still the CEO of a rising tech company, but behind the scenes, I was the woman who now owned the company my father had built his identity around. And still he didn't know. He walked into Mountain Tech every morning, parked in the same spot, sat in the same chair, bragged about mentoring the next generation of tech leaders, never once realizing that every decision above his pay grade now ended with me. I had the power to restructure, to terminate, to erase him completely. But I didn't. Not yet. Because this wasn't just about removing him. This was about showing him what it felt like to be erased slowly, silently, exactly the way he'd erased me. So I left him in place. I let him run meetings, let him sit in on strategy calls where, unbeknownst to him, I was already present, listed under a pseudonym. He never once questioned why policy changes arrived from Helix Frame Executive Division. He just signed, nodded, took the credit. Of course he did, but I didn't care about the credit. I cared about the moment. The moment he'd have to read my name, printed in black ink. The moment his voice would catch mid-sentence, his posture falter, his kingdom collapse, in front of everyone who had once laughed with him. That kind of reckoning couldn't be rushed. So I waited. I finalized the board transition paperwork in February, transferred all legal titles in March, moved the company's charter from Mountain Tech as internal name to Helix Frame Holdings in April. And then I circled June 19th on my calendar. Father's Day. It was poetic, personal, precise. I didn't announce it, didn't send a warning. Instead, I RSVP'd to the annual family barbecue with a simple message in the group chat, "I'll be there." The response was a handful of thumbs-up emojis. No one said anything else, not even Dad, which was perfect, because they were all still living in a world where I was the forgotten daughter, the one who never finished anything, never quite measured up. They had no idea I'd been building something for years, something stronger than resentment. I was building clarity, power, freedom, and now I was ready to step into the light, not to be seen, but to make sure they couldn't unsee me again. The sun was already low over the backyard when I pulled into the driveway. The same patio furniture was there, the weathered Adirondack chairs, the folding tables covered with red and white checkered cloths, the cooler full of domestic beer. I could hear the grill sizzling from the side of the house, Colton yelling about ribs, Derek arguing over fantasy football. The exact same chaos I remembered from every other Father's Day. Except this time, I didn't walk in as a ghost. This time, I drove up in a midnight black Jaguar, tinted windows, matte finish, quiet engine. Heads turned. Glasses paused midair. Even the kids stopped chasing each other on the lawn. I stepped out slowly, heels clicking on the driveway. Tailored navy dress, sunglasses, black envelope in hand. Every movement measured, every breath deliberate. Maris. Mom called out from the back porch, startled but smiling. Colton raised an eyebrow. Didn't think you still existed. Derek whistled low. Damn. Who died? My father, Franklin Camden, stood from his seat at the head of the patio table, beer in hand, tan khakis, blue polo, the same smug smile on his face that he wore like a uniform. Well, look who decided to show up for once. I walked straight past him, straight past the table, and into the house. The room fell silent. I returned less than 30 seconds later, tossing him a small, sleek key fob and laying the envelope gently in front of his dinner plate. Happy Father's Day, I said softly. He blinked, confused. What's this? A gift, I said. One you'll want to read carefully. He chuckled. You didn't have to get me anything. What is it, a car lease? That thing out front yours? I said nothing. He opened the envelope, and then everything stopped. At first, he didn't react. Then his eyes narrowed, scanning the first paragraph, then the second, and his jaw locked. His mouth twitched. He flipped the page, flipped it back, looked up at me, back at the page. His knuckles went white. What the hell is this? His voice was low, tight. Derek leaned over, squinting. Dad. Franklin stood abruptly, the chair behind him screeching against the patio. This is a joke, right, Maris? What is this? I tilted my head, calm as ever. It's the formal transfer of ownership of Mountain Tech Solutions, I said. The company you've worked at for almost 2 decades. He stared at me like I'd slapped him. You're lying. No, I said evenly. I bought it 9 months ago. Colton stood now, too. Wait, Mountain Tech? That's Dad's company. What are you even talking about? I'm the majority shareholder, I replied. Your father now works under the leadership board at Helix Frame Holdings, and I am Helix Frame. Silence. Total, bone-deep silence. Then Mom gasped. Derek's mouth dropped open. Colton looked like he was trying to remember if this was some kind of prank they hadn't been letting on. And my father? He stared at me, and for the first time in my life he saw me. His face drained of color. You're saying I work for you? No, I said quietly. You work under people who work for me. I let the words hang there, like smoke in the summer air. His pride, his stories, his name, it all unraveled in a single sentence. What kind of stunt is this? He hissed. Why would you? Why? I stepped closer now, my voice still soft. Maybe because for 30 years I begged for you to see me, and you never once looked up. The table was frozen. The kids were quiet. Everyone was listening now. But you'll remember this moment, I said, because this time I didn't ask for a seat at the table. I bought the whole damn building the table sits in. And just like that, I turned, stepped off the patio, and walked toward the car. The engine purred to life with a whisper. I didn't need to slam a door, didn't need to look back, because behind me I heard it, my father shouting my name, but not with anger, with fear. I didn't drive far. Just a few blocks away, I pulled over on a quiet residential street, engine humming beneath me. I didn't cry, didn't scream. I just sat there letting the moment sink in, not for him, for me. For the first time in 30 years, I wasn't holding my breath. Back at the house, chaos was unraveling. I could picture it perfectly. The stunned silence, the slow drip of realization sliding into panic. My father, once the man who had every answer, now standing in the center of the backyard with a sheet of paper trembling in his hands. His sons on either side, crowding around like children, no longer sure the grown-up in the room knows what he's doing. What does it mean? Derek would ask, eyes darting to Colton. Wait, is this real? Colton would demand, is this even legal? And my father, Franklin Camden, the man who raised 2 sons to believe that power belonged only to men who commanded rooms. He'd suddenly find himself powerless. I imagined him trying to explain something he didn't understand, trying to answer questions he never thought he'd have to, trying to justify a lifetime of silence with nothing but a choke in his throat. He would reread the words over and over, hoping they might say something different, but they wouldn't, because every word was real, every name was legal, every transfer already complete. I didn't take the title of CEO to get revenge. I took it because it was mine, because I built it, because no one gave it to me and no one could take it away. Inside that backyard, the legacy he thought was his began to dissolve. Colton sat down first, slowly, hands laced, brows drawn. He was the logical one, the one who would realize first that this wasn't temporary. Derek stood still longer, arms crossed, denial plastered across his face. She's bluffing, he might have muttered, but then someone would have pulled out a phone, searched the records. See my name. No aliases, no hiding. Maris Camden, CEO, owner, majority shareholder. And that's when it would hit. Everything they'd mocked, everything they'd dismissed. It had grown teeth. They weren't the kings of this family anymore. They weren't even close. And Franklin, he'd feel it most of all, not just the professional blow, but the personal one. The sting of watching the daughter he'd erased quietly become the one who held the pen to his story. I didn't need to see his face to know it. The weight in my chest had lifted, not out of vengeance, not even satisfaction, but something simpler. Peace. He can never unknow what he knows now. They all know. And now, every time he walks into that office, sits down at that desk, or flips through a company memo, he'll remember. Every wall is mine. Every meeting is mine. Every ounce of silence he gave me, I turned into strategy. He can't undo it, and he'll never get the chance. I didn't return any of their calls. Not the missed ones from Colton. Not the frantic voicemails from Derek, asking me to explain what the hell happened. Not even the text from my father. Just one word, sent the morning after Father's Day. Why? I let them all sit unread. Let the notifications pile up like dust on a bookshelf. I owed them nothing. And for the first time in my life, that felt right. The silence wasn't a punishment. It was a boundary. I spent the week working from my new office, a floor-to-ceiling glass corner space overlooking the city I'd once tried so hard to escape. Now it belonged to me. The desk was simple, the chair comfortable. There were no pictures on the walls, no trophies, no gold nameplates. I didn't need them. I knew who I was. On Saturday, I drove out to a quiet part of the city, past the noise, past the construction cranes, past the chatter. Mom was waiting for me on the porch of a little craftsman bungalow. Her hair was thinner than I remembered, her eyes softer. She smiled when she saw me. I figured it out, she said, handing me a cup of tea. I didn't ask what she meant. I just sat beside her. She took a slow sip. You didn't do it to hurt him. You did it so you could stop hurting. I nodded. The backyard was quiet. The wind soft. No shouting. No toasts. No pressure to perform. Just stillness. I should have spoken up more, she whispered. I saw it, all those years, the way he looked through you. You tried, I said, and I meant it. She looked at me then, really looked like she hadn't in years. You're not invisible anymore. No, I said, smiling into my tea. I never was. He just chose not to see. And now, he couldn't unsee me if he tried. I didn't need to walk back into that house. Didn't need a grand reunion. Didn't need to forgive anyone on command. My peace didn't require their permission. I had spent my entire life trying to earn a seat at a table that was never built for me. So I built my own, from the ground up, quietly, relentlessly, without applause, and in doing so, I built something far greater than revenge. I built freedom. These days I walk a little taller, speak a little slower. I don't rush to fill the silence anymore, because I've learned the quietest women often carry the sharpest truths. And mine? You can only ignore someone for so long before they become the very force that outgrows you.